A voice cut through the calm of the first-class cabin like a blade. "Sir, there has been a mistake. We need you to give up your seat for our VIP passenger." The entire cabin froze. Crystal glasses still trembled slightly in passengers' hands, but every gaze turned toward seat 2A. There sat Darius Coleman, a 44-year-old black man who had just taken his seat. The soft golden light fell across his face, creating a sharp contrast. On one side, his calm and dignified composure. On the other, the thinly veiled disdain behind the forced smile of flight attendant Melissa Grant. Behind her stepped Victoria Hale, a white woman in an expensive blue dress, a golden watch gleaming like a badge of status. She tilted her chin, her eyes sweeping over Darius with arrogant disdain. "I always sit here," Victoria announced, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "This is practically my seat by default." A murmur spread quickly, like an electric current rippling through the cabin. A few people looked up from their laptops. Some discreetly lifted their phones, lenses secretly recording every moment. Darius did not react immediately. He looked up, surprise flashing briefly in his eyes, then fading into composure. Slowly, he reached into his wallet, pulled out his platinum membership card, and spoke clearly, firmly. "I am a platinum member. This seat was assigned to me 2A. For a split second, the smile on Melissa's face cracked like a mask splitting open. But she quickly reset it, her voice steady, each word laced with condescension as though speaking to someone beneath her. "I understand, sir. But this seat is usually reserved for better customers." The word better hung in the air like lead, thickening the atmosphere in the cabin. Victoria smirked, her lips curling into a satisfied grin. In their eyes, Darius was just a black passenger in the wrong seat. Someone who should quietly stand, step aside, and make way for the powerful regular. What they did not know was that the man they dismissed so easily was none other than the CEO of Vision Tech AI, a $3 billion company, the very man behind contracts Aurelia Airlines so desperately wanted. A single nod from him could save the airline. A single shake of his head could sink it. The cabin waited for his response. Some passengers sighed quietly. Others lowered their eyes as if to hide. The silence of the crowd heavier than any insult. Darius remained seated, his breath steady, his posture straight. His mind drifted back to his childhood in Southside Chicago. Long nights hunched over a dim old computer, typing lines of code with the belief that knowledge could carve a way forward. He remembered his father's funeral, the day a 16-year-old boy vowed that the world would one day see the person, not the skin color. That vow still burned within him. And this moment, here at seat 2A, was its harshest test. Melissa's eyes tightened, her hands clenched as though preparing to force the issue. Victoria clicked her tongue, tapping her nails impatiently against her watch. Neither of them knew that this charade of humiliation would not only disgrace one passenger, it was about to ignite a storm, a hurricane that would rip away Aurelia Airlines' polished facade of luxury and power. A young passenger across the aisle trembled as he raised his phone, capturing the moment Victoria discreetly slipped a wad of cash into Melissa's hand. "Thank you for handling this," Victoria whispered. The lens caught it all. A brief exchange, but enough to expose the truth. The golden lights still glowed, the leather seats still gave off their luxurious scent, and the soft piano music still drifted through the cabin. But to Darius, everything had changed. This was no longer a first-class cabin. This was a battlefield. He clenched his fist lightly, not out of rage boiling over, but from the steady flame rising in his chest. The flame of justice. The flame of a vow made in youth, now blazing to tear down prejudice. No one in the cabin knew that this very moment marked the beginning of Aurelia Airlines' downfall and the beginning of a reform that history would not forget. The lights in Aurelia Airlines' first-class cabin seemed harsher now, as if determined to expose the injustice that had just unfolded. People chuckled softly, whispered among themselves, but no one stood up. They chose silence. They chose safety. Darius Coleman drew a long, steady breath, his eyes sweeping slowly across the cabin. He saw faces lowered in avoidance, saw the faint glow of phones secretly recording. Some shook their heads, some showed fleeting compassion before quickly turning away, as though they too were guilty. He knew this feeling well, the feeling of being treated as though he did not belong. He had faced it thousands of times, in classrooms, in boardrooms, even after he had achieved success. But this time was different. This time he was not just a black man in the wrong seat. He was a symbol, and the eyes of everyone in that cabin were waiting to see what he would do. Melissa, the flight attendant, pressed her lips together. For an instant, worry flickered across her face, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. She clutched the wad of cash that had been slipped into her hand and spun sharply toward the front of the cabin. "Sir, if you do not cooperate, I will have to call the supervisor." Behind her, Victoria Hale raised an eyebrow and let out a mocking laugh, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. "How troublesome. I don't understand why the airline allows people like this into first class." Her words cut through the air like a blade. Many passengers frowned, but still no one spoke up. Darius closed his eyes briefly. He remembered that morning at the airport, when security cameras had captured him helping an elderly woman lift her suitcase onto the conveyor belt, smiling at the check, in staff, tipping the cleaning attendant. That was who he was. Kind, humble, but never willing to bow before injustice. He opened his eyes, his voice deep but clear. "This is my seat. I paid for it in full. Aid. I will not leave." The cabin fell silent. Melissa swallowed hard, turned on her heel, and walked quickly toward the front. The atmosphere froze solid, broken only by the pounding hearts of those watching. Moments later, the first-class supervisor, Ethan Rowe, strode in. Tall, imposing, his movements stiff with authority. Behind him loomed the figure of Captain Douglas Reeves. The confrontation had escalated into something far more serious. Ethan stopped directly in front of Darius, his voice booming, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mr. Coleman, you must give up this seat. This is our decision to ensure comfort for our VIP guest. If you do not comply, we will be forced to remove you from this flight." A wave of whispers spread. One passenger murmured, "But he's a platinum member." Another quickly glanced around, then fell silent, afraid of being drawn in. Darius slowly rose to his feet. His gaze did not waver, his eyes sharp as awls, drawn steel. You say I am causing a disturbance? I am simply sitting in the seat assigned to me. If that is your claim, then I want to hear the exact regulation. Which rule allows you to strip me of my rightful seat? Ethan faltered slightly, taken aback. Captain Reeves crossed his arms, his tone firm. We have the right to refuse service to any passenger who disrupts the order and comfort of the flight. Disruption? Darius let out a quiet laugh, tinged with both bitterness and defiance. If me sitting in the seat I paid for is a disruption, then perhaps you should reopen your dictionary. A few passengers stifled nervous laughs, quickly swallowed by the tension. Melissa returned, standing beside Victoria. Both looked at Darius as though he were an inconvenience slowing down the machinery of privilege they had always taken for granted. But they did not realize that their arrogance was engraving their names onto the opening chapter of a public relations nightmare. The LED lights gleamed off polished wood tables and untouched champagne glasses. Everything designed to project prestige had become the stage for a scandal, now being recorded from dozens of angles. Darius sat back down, calmly pulled out his phone, and turned on the camera. Very well. If you intend to act unjustly, I will record everything. In that instant, an invisible wave swept through the cabin. Passengers froze, then more phones were lifted higher, screens glowing bright. No one remained a silent bystander. Everyone had just become a witness. Melissa's face turned pale. Ethan ground his teeth. Victoria sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. You can record all you like, but in the end, you will still be removed, and I will be back in my seat. Darius locked eyes with her, his gaze steady, calm, almost unnervingly deep. He did not need to answer, because he knew that in just a few hours, the world would see this footage. And when that happened, it would not be him on trial. It would be Aurelia Airlines, standing before the court of public opinion. Heavy footsteps echoed along the red-carpeted aisle of the first-class cabin. 2 airport security officers appeared, broad-shouldered and stone, faced like moving statues. Every eye in the cabin turned toward them. The soft music was gone. The clink of glasses silenced. The air thickened, heavy, and ready to explode. Darius Coleman remained seated. The phone in his hand glowed, recording every step of the 2 blue uniforms as they approached. He knew this was the turning point, not just for this flight, but for an end system corroded by arrogance and prejudice. The officers stopped. One spoke, his tone flat but sharp. Sir, we've been instructed to remove you from the aircraft immediately. Darius lifted his head, his eyes calm in a way that unsettled. He did not argue, did not resist. He simply asked, each word clear and deliberate. Tell me, which rule have I broken? The simple question dropped into the cabin like a hammer blow. Some passengers held their breath, 1 or 2 nodding unconsciously, silently agreeing. The officers glanced at each other, momentarily unsure, then repeated, You need to leave the plane, sir. No, Darius replied, his voice low but resonant. You need to give me a reason. I have a ticket. I have platinum status. This is my seat. If there is an issue, state it clearly. At the front, Captain Douglas Reeves stood with his arms crossed, his face cold as steel. Supervisor Ethan Rowe frowned, whispering to Melissa, his eyes flicking nervously toward Victoria Hale. And then, pouring gasoline onto the fire, Victoria's shrill voice cut through the air. "Oh, for heaven's sake, what more is there to explain? It's obvious he doesn't belong here. I already told you. Seat 2A is mine." A cruel laugh slipped from her painted lips. But at that moment, a passenger across the aisle, holding up his phone, muttered aloud, "My God, I caught it on camera." She paid off the flight attendant. The cabin erupted with murmurs. Melissa's face drained of color. Victoria froze, then tried to recover, fumbling with her purse. Darius tilted his phone slightly, its screen glowing brightly, showing the video he had just saved. Victoria slipping a wad of cash into Melissa's hand, whispering, "Thank you for handling it." The footage was sharp, the audio clear. It was undeniable. A silent wave swept through the cabin. Eyes that had been cold or indifferent now shifted. Passengers whispered, "She really bribed her. This is blatant discrimination." Yet still, no one dared to stand up publicly. Cowardly silence held its grip. Ethan's face flushed as he struggled to regain control. He barked, "Regardless, Mr. Coleman, we must insist you leave the plane. You are disrupting the flight and causing a disturbance." "Causing a disturbance?" Darius let out a short laugh, quiet but cutting. "If recording the truth is a disturbance, then this entire cabin is guilty. Everyone here is filming." Ethan faltered. Melissa trembled, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Victoria crossed her arms, still trying to end it with disdain. "Stop wasting time! Take him off!" The officers stepped forward, each placing a hand on Darius's shoulder. The cabin was so quiet, the sound of a few passengers' quickened breaths filled the air. But Darius did not resist. He rose slowly, adjusting his jacket with deliberate composure. Every movement radiated calm, not of a man being dragged away, but of a general leaving the battlefield to prepare for the greater war ahead. As he passed Victoria, he paused for half a second. His eyes met her haughty gaze. For the briefest moment, she shuddered, a chill running through her as though she had just made a mistake that could never be undone. The officers escorted Darius to the aircraft door. Passengers watched in silence, some lowering their eyes in shame, others secretly tapping send as they uploaded their videos to social media. Short clips, only seconds long, but powerful enough to ignite a firestorm beyond the confines of first class. Outside, the cold wind hit his face. Darius inhaled deeply, steadying himself. He checked his phone again. Every frame, every word was captured perfectly. He smiled faintly, not the smile of defeat, but of a man holding the strongest weapon of all. Back on the plane, Victoria settled into seat 2A, raising her champagne glass as if she had won. But she had no idea her victory would last only minutes. Outside, a storm was already gathering, ready to sweep away the arrogance and deceit of Aurelia Airlines. First class returned to its noise. But this time, it was not laughter or polite chatter. It was the sound of murmurs, fingers typing, hundreds of clips being shared. The digital storm had begun, and nothing could stop it now. The cold wind on the tarmac struck his face like a slap, a harsh reminder that he had just been forced out of the very place where he should have been respected most. Darius Coleman stood tall, his hand gripping his phone. The screen lit up, playing back the video he had just recorded, the tense face of Melissa, Ethan's calculating stare, Victoria's hand slipping money into hers, and the sharp voice saying, "Thank you for handling it." He pressed play again. The sound filled the silent hallway of the airport. Clear, crisp, undeniable. Darius smiled faintly. It was a thin smile, not of victory, but of a man holding the torch that would burn down a curtain of lies. Behind him, in the cabin of the plane, passengers still murmured. Many kept their heads lowered, but their hands were busy sending videos, posting them to social media. Within minutes, the clips had left the cabin, flown through Wi-Fi, and landed on millions of screens across the globe. A Twitter user wrote, "Unbelievable. Aurelia Airlines just kicked a black passenger out of his first-class seat, even though he had a valid ticket. And there's a bribe caught on camera." The hashtag Aurelia bias ignited like a spark in a barrel of fuel. In just 20 minutes, it soared to the top of the national trending list. On TikTok, the video of Victoria handing cash to Melissa played on loop. People added dramatic music, captions flashing, "This isn't a movie, this is reality." Comments flooded in. "What year is this, and this still happens? That's Darius Coleman, CEO of Vision Tech. This airline is finished. Justice is coming, and this time it's in 4K. On Facebook, community groups spread the video everywhere. An independent journalist wrote, "This isn't just discrimination, it's corruption caught on board. Aurelia Airlines must answer immediately." Within an hour, views had surpassed 5 million. The number kept climbing every second, like the heartbeat of a beast waking from its slumber. In the airport's VIP lounge, Darius sat down and opened his laptop. His phone buzzed with messages from friends, partners, and his own team at Vision Tech. "Boss, we're seeing the video everywhere." "Don't worry, public opinion is on your side." "Do you want me to draft a press release now?" He shook his head. No need to rush. The truth was strong enough to spread on its own. His gaze shifted to the glass window where the Aurelia Airlines plane still sat, preparing to take off, oblivious to the bomb of public outrage strapped to its wings. Meanwhile, at Aurelia Airlines headquarters, thousands of miles away, the boardroom was in chaos. CEO Robert Langford sat frozen before the large screen, looping the viral videos. Next to him, the head of PR trembled as phones rang non-stop. "Mr. Langford, the hashtag is #1 nationwide. Our stock has dropped 7% in the past 30 minutes. Robert's face turned pale, and he whispered to himself, "That man, who is he?" An aide rushed forward with a file, his voice breaking. "Sir, that is Darius Coleman, CEO of Vision Tech AI, the company we are negotiating a $660 million contract with, and he's also one of Aurelia Airlines' largest shareholders." The room fell into stunned silence. Coffee cups trembled in shaking hands. A few executives gasped, as though they had just heard a death sentence. In that instant, they all understood. This wasn't just a passenger humiliated. It was the man who held their company's future in his hands. And now, he also had the entire world on his side. Back in the lounge, Darius glanced at his phone again, watching his follower count skyrocket. He typed only one simple line: "Justice flies first class." That short sentence was enough to ignite the internet all over again. Millions of shares, tens of thousands of comments. This isn't about one flight anymore. This is a fight for justice. I'll never fly Aurelia again. This man spoke the truth for all of us. In that moment, Darius knew the battle had grown beyond him. Justice was no longer his alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever been dismissed, excluded, or told they didn't belong. Outside, the Aurelia Airlines plane lifted off into the sky. But on the ground, a storm had already begun, and this time, nothing could stop it. Afternoon light filtered through the glass windows of Aurelia Airlines' headquarters. But inside the boardroom, there was no light left except panic. The massive LED screen replayed the first-class incident over and over. Every frame was a blade slashing into the airline's reputation. CEO Robert Langford slumped in his chair, hands trembling around a cup of coffee gone cold. Beside him, PR Director Janet Moore clutched her phone, her fingers shaking. "Mr. Langford, the video has passed 10 million views in just a few hours. The hashtag #AureliaBias is trending worldwide. Major outlets are running headlines." On the screen, bold words glared back. Aurelia Airlines ejects Black CEO from first-class seat. Bribery caught on board. Major shareholder publicly humiliated. Langford swallowed hard, his voice hoarse. That man, who exactly is he? Janet glanced down at a hastily printed file, her face pale. That's Darius Coleman, 44 years old, CEO of Vision Tech AI. His company is worth $3 billion. He isn't just a VIP passenger. He's also one of Aurelia's largest shareholders. He holds 25%. The room went silent, suffocating. Faces that once radiated confidence were now drained of color. They all understood. This was no ordinary scandal. This was an earthquake that could bury Aurelia Airlines. The CFO stammered, "We've already lost 12% of our market value this morning. At this rate, billions in capitalization could evaporate in a single day." An elderly lawyer raised his hand, voice unsteady. "And if Mr. Coleman sues or pulls all of his investment, Aurelia will collapse." Langford dropped his head into his hands, the pressure tightening like a noose around his neck. Meanwhile, in the VIP lounge at the airport, Darius sat alone. In stark contrast to the chaos raging outside, his expression was calm. A cup of tea steamed quietly on the table. His phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, calls, emails from journalists, investors, partners. He read only a few short notes, then typed a reply to Vision Tech's COO. "No press release. Let the truth speak for itself." That was Darius's strength. Composure. He knew this storm no longer needed him to fan its flames. It had already grown into a cyclone on its own. A young woman, the same passenger from first class, stepped hesitantly into the lounge. Her face was still flushed with anger. In her hand, her phone glowed with the video she had recorded from beginning to end. "Mr. Coleman, I captured everything. From the moment they asked you to give up your seat to when they escorted you off. If you need it, I'll send it right now." Darius looked at her, his eyes softening. He rose to his feet and nodded. "Thank you. This video will matter. Not just for me, but for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly." She smiled, pride shining in her eyes. In that moment, Darius felt it clearly. He was no longer alone. An entire community now stood with him. Across the digital world, the social media storm raged beyond control. Twitter, TikTok, Facebook overflowed with clips of Victoria passing cash, Melissa bowing her head, Ethan ordering the removal, and Captain Reeves standing cold and silent. The flood of angry comments became a collective verdict. This isn't a mistake, it's a culture of discrimination. An airline that lives off its passengers but despises them. We must boycott Aurelia Airlines. Investors jammed the hotlines, demanding answers. A financial news channel ran a banner across the screen. Aurelia Airlines faces the greatest crisis in its history. Inside the boardroom, Langford clutched his head and whispered in despair, "My God, we threw off the very man who could have saved this company." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky burning red like the storm about to erupt. Darius sat in the lounge, gazing out at the endless runway. He knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, he would not have to fight for justice. Justice would come on its own, carried by the anger of millions. And Aurelia Airlines would have no choice but to bow its head. Night fell over the city, like a black shroud over Aurelia Airlines' headquarters. But inside the towering glass building, the lights still burned white and cold. An emergency meeting dragged on for hours. With every passing second, the stock price plunged further, and trust eroded even more. Robert Langford, the CEO, stood before the window, staring down at the endless stream of cars. In the reflection, he saw his own face, drained and aged by 10 years in a single day. Behind him, the board shouted and argued, voices colliding like a tangled storm. "We have to fire everyone involved immediately. No, we must negotiate with Mr. Coleman, or we'll lose everything. We need a press release apology as soon as possible." The shouting overlapped, frantic and desperate. But beneath every word was the same truth. Fear. Elsewhere in the city, flight attendant Melissa Grant, the woman who had taken money from Victoria, sat in her cramped apartment. The screen of her phone glowed with thousands of notifications, criticism, curses, even threats. Corruption in the skies. She sold her dignity for a handful of dirty bills. This kind of person doesn't belong in the service industry. Melissa shivered, gasping for breath. She had never imagined that one impulsive decision, one nod for a bit of cash, could turn her life into a living hell. Her phone rang. It was her mother. The trembling voice came through the line. "Melissa, I saw the news on television. They mentioned your name. What have you done?" Melissa bit her lip as her eyes blurred with tears. But no amount of crying could erase the truth. The whole world had seen her take that money. Meanwhile, Ethan Rowe, the first-class supervisor, stumbled into a dark bar. He slumped into a seat, ordering gus after gus of liquor. But the burn of alcohol could not drown out the voices echoing in his head. "Mr. Coleman, you are causing a disturbance. In that case, you will need to leave the plane." His own words replayed as a damning verdict. His phone buzzed non-stop in his pocket. A message from HR read, "Mandatory meeting tomorrow morning. Urgent." Ethan let out a bitter, hollow laugh. He had thought he held power, that passengers were nothing but people to obey. But now, his arrogance had marked the end of his career. In her suburban mansion, Victoria Hale sipped champagne, but the taste was bitter. On her laptop, the image of her slipping cash into Melissa's hand replayed endlessly across every news broadcast. Her once proud face had become the symbol of privilege and corruption. Her phone rang. Her private lawyer's voice came urgent and sharp. "Victoria, the advertising firm just terminated their contract. They don't want to be associated with this scandal. And there are rumors that major clients are preparing lawsuits over your act of bribery." Victoria clenched her glass so hard the crystal cracked, red wine spilling down her hand like blood. She screamed, but the sound dissolved into the empty void of her mansion. For the first time, real fear pounded at her chest. Back on the plane, Captain Douglas Reeves remained in the cockpit, piloting the flight as if nothing had happened. But when the aircraft landed, airport security intercepted him. A packet of papers was placed in his hand. Immediate suspension, pending investigation. The cold eyes of passengers and colleagues pierced him like needles. 30 years of service, thousands of safe flights, all brought down by one fatal choice: silence in the face of injustice. Back at Aurelia's headquarters, PR Director Janet Moore raised her phone, panic in her eyes. "We just received an email from Coleman. He will not accept any apology in the form of money. He is demanding a full cultural overhaul of the company and the immediate termination of everyone involved." The room erupted in shock. Langford shrank back, feeling the walls collapsing around him. Another director stammered in terror. "We can't. If we do that, there will be lawsuits, union backlash." But deep down, they all knew the truth. Darius Coleman held the public, the shares, and the future of the airline in his hands. Outside the building, hundreds of protesters had gathered. Their chants echoed through the streets. "Justice for Coleman! Boycott Aurelia Airlines!" Camera flashes lit up the night as journalists crowded in. The storm was no longer confined to social media. It had spilled into the real world. Langford turned back to the screen and saw the image of Darius sitting calmly in the airport lounge, sipping tea, while a single line on his social media had already become a global rallying cry. "Justice will fly first class." Langford understood then. The battle would not be decided in this boardroom. It had already been decided by the man they had humiliated. The next morning, the headquarters of Aurelia Airlines was cloaked in gloom. Golden sunlight streamed through the towering glass windows, but inside the boardroom, there was no warmth to be felt. Faces were ashen, hands trembled as they turned the pages of newspapers plastered with headlines. Aurelia Airlines, a symbol of discrimination and corruption. Major shareholder humiliated on his own flight. VisionTech may pull out, Aurelia on the brink of collapse. Whispers flickered through the room. The heavy tapping of pens broke the silence. Then the heavy wooden doors swung open. Darius Coleman walked in. He wore no flashy jacket, no extravagant accessories, just a simple black suit, a grey tie, his steps slow but steady. The room fell silent, the air thick as though the storm of social media from the night before had swept directly into this place. Robert Langford, the CEO, leapt to his feet, a forced smile stretching across his lips. "Mr. Coleman, we sincerely apologize for the unfortunate incident." "Unfortunate?" Darius repeated, his voice low, his eyes cutting into Langford like blades. You call that an unfortunate incident? Langford faltered, sweat beading on his forehead. No one dared speak. Darius pulled out a chair and sat at the head of the table, without invitation. The gesture was a soylent declaration. This was no longer Aurelia's domain. This was his stage. Folding his arms, his voice rang clear with each word. I am not here to hear apologies. Apologies do not erase the humiliation I endured, nor do they erase the truth that Aurelia's culture is rotten to the core. I am here to set conditions. The room jolted. Frightened eyes darted to one another. Darius leaned forward, his gaze sharp as steel. Condition 1. The immediate dismissal of those involved, Melissa Grant, Ethan Rowe, and Captain Douglas Reeves. They did not simply break procedure. They embodied a system of entrenched discrimination. A few directors gasped. But Mr. Coleman, Reeves has 30 years of experience. 30 years of experience? Darius cut in, his voice iron hard. That makes it worse, because it means that for 30 years, Aurelia has allowed discrimination to exist unchecked. That is not an accomplishment. That is evidence of guilt. The atmosphere tightened, collars stretched, hands clenched around papers. Condition 2, Darius continued, his tone slower but heavy as a hammer. Aurelia must immediately implement a cultural overhaul, not shallow workshops for show. I want a comprehensive plan. Anti-bias training for every employee, transparent dispute resolution procedures, and a public commitment that every passenger will be respected. Langford tried to steady his voice. Mr. Coleman, such changes take time. If you could give us... Darius slammed his palm onto the table. The sound cracked like thunder, rattling the room. There is no more time. His words came sharp and rapid. Your stock has already fallen 15%. Crowds are protesting outside your headquarters. You are standing on the edge of collapse, and I am the only one who can pull you back. But only if you do the right thing. Leaning back, he finished slowly. If not, I will withdraw every cent of my investment. I will let the market decide Aurelia's fate. And I promise you, you will not survive until the end of this year. A shudder rippled across the room. Faces drained with fear. Pens clattered to the floor. Everyone understood. This was no threat. This was a verdict. Langford opened his mouth, but no words came out. His heart pounded, and one thought carved itself into his mind. Aurelia had handed itself into this man's hands. Beyond the glass, the sun rose higher, its light streaming across the boardroom table. Darius allowed himself a faint smile. It was not the smile of revenge. It was the smile of a man who had delivered an ultimatum and knew with certainty that he would win. The heavy boardroom doors closed with a dull thud, leaving behind the acrid scent of tension. Darius Coleman had just walked out, leaving his ultimatum like a blade cutting straight through the hearts of Aurelia's entire leadership team. In the suffocating room, the directors looked at one another with despair in their eyes. They knew. Either obey Darius, or the company would collapse. Robert Langford lowered his head, his voice breaking. Carry out every demand. There is no way back. The news spread like lightning. Within hours, 3 names dominated every headline. Melissa Grant, Ethan Rowe, Captain Douglas Reeves. All were terminated immediately. Melissa's small apartment was drowned in darkness. Her phone would not stop ringing. Reporters, former colleagues, even strangers sending threats. She slumped down, staring at the curt email from Aurelia. Employment terminated, effective immediately. Reason: severe violation of professional standards. Melissa dropped the phone, covering her face with her hands. In a single day, everything had collapsed. 12 years of work, her reputation, her future. All of it traded for a handful of bills that had now become eternal evidence of her disgrace. The doorbell rang. Neighbors pounded on the door, shouting cruel words. "You've shamed the whole neighborhood." Melissa buried her face and sobbed, knowing her life would never be the same. In the bar where he once strutted with confidence, Ethan Rowe now sat in heavy silence. On the wall, mounted screen, the news replayed over and over. Ethan barking at Darius, "You are causing a disturbance. You must leave the plane." Patrons stared at him with contempt. One man hurled a beer glass to the floor, shouting, "That's him, the man who disrespected passengers." Ethan dropped his gaze, clutching a newspaper. Rowe fired, under investigation for abuse of power. His hands trembled violently. 20 years of career, built on an illusion of authority, now crumbled into smoke. In his quiet suburban home, Reeves sat frozen before a letter, suspending him from flying indefinitely. 30 years in the industry, thousands of safe flights, all erased by one wrong choice, siding with injustice. He opened a family photo album, pages filled with uniformed smiles after successful flights. Now, those images mocked him. Reeves whispered to himself, "If only I had taken one step down the aisle. Just one step." One step of cowardice had cost him his entire career. In her lavish mansion, Victoria Hale hurled her laptop to the floor. The screen shattered, but it could not silence the storm outside. Headlines blazed across the television. Businesswoman Victoria Hale exposed for bribing flight attendant. Privilege on display sparks global outrage. Her phone rang incessantly. Her lawyer's urgent voice carried bad news. "Victoria, the ad agency has cancelled the contract." "Cool. 2 fashion brands have suspended partnerships. Your company's stock is plummeting." She collapsed onto the sofa, the wine bottle slipping from her hand and shattering. The sharp scent filled the room like smoke. For the first time in her life, Victoria realized money was no longer her shield. It had become evidence against her. Outside, the wave of outrage grew fiercer. Protests swelled in front of Aurelia's headquarters. Thousands held signs high. "No justice, no flights. Justice belongs in first class." On social media, millions shared images of Darius sitting calmly in the airport lounge, a cup of tea beside him. His short message had become a global rallying cry. Justice will fly first class. In his hotel room, Darius stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie. He knew tomorrow would not be just a battle of law or media. It would be a fight for total reform. He thought of his father, of the vow he made at 16. "One day, I will make the world see the value of a person, not the color of their skin." That day had finally come, and it all began with seat 2A. The morning sun cast a golden glow across the glass tower of Aurelia Airlines. But inside, the atmosphere was heavy as lead. After hours of emergency meetings, the board finally had no choice but to sign the reform pledge that Darius Coleman had placed on the table. The room was silent as Robert Langford, the CEO, picked up the pen. His fingers trembled violently. He signed as though he were signing his own death sentence. The pen pressed down, ink bleeding into every stroke. The official pledge of Aurelia Airlines to change. The conditions were spelled out clearly. Mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, from flight attendants to executives. A transparent process for handling seat disputes with no more invisible VIPs. Absolute protection for whistleblowers within the company. And a public commitment that every passenger, regardless of skin color or social status, would be treated equally. There was no room left for cover. Oops. This was not another round of token workshops. This was a major surgery, forcing Aurelia to cut out the cancer of discrimination that had lived in its body for decades. Langford raised his head, meeting the hollow stares of his executives. He knew. Power no longer belonged to this room. It was now in the hands of the man they had once humiliated. That afternoon, at the luxury hotel where Darius was staying, a press conference was packed wall to wall with reporters. Cameras pointed forward, microphones jostling for space. Millions watched the live broadcast. Darius stepped to the podium, calm and steady, his eyes alight. He wore a simple black suit with a silver tie, commanding attention without needing to ask for it. The entire room fell into silence, waiting. "Yesterday," he began, his voice deep yet resonant. "I was forced out of a first-class seat, despite holding a valid ticket, simply because of my skin color and prejudice. But more important than that, this is not just my story. It is the story of millions of passengers who have been dismissed, belittled, and treated unfairly." The cameras zoomed in, capturing the resolve in his gaze. Today, Aurelia Airlines has signed a pledge for reform. This is not my personal victory. This is justice's victory. I want every airline, every service business, to look at this moment and understand. Customers are not skin color. Customers are not social standing. Customers are human beings, and every human being deserves risk. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Online, millions of hearts pounded in unison. The news rippled like a tsunami. Airlines around the world scrambled to call emergency meetings, fearing they could be the next target of public outrage. A major newspaper ran the headline, "One man, one seat, changed an entire industry." Investors swung their support toward Darius, calling him the man holding the keys to Aurelia's future. Human rights organizations praised him as a symbol of change. In airports, passengers who had once endured discrimination now held their heads high, believing at last that their stories carried weight. Meanwhile, Melissa, Ethan, Reeves, and Victoria continued to suffer the consequences. Melissa applied for jobs at dozens of places, but everyone turned her away. Ethan was branded by the press as an abuser of power. The bar where he once bragged now treated him like a plague. Reeves faced a disciplinary board and had his pilot's license permanently revoked. Victoria was cast out of high society, her personal brand destroyed, her friends abandoning her. Those who once clung to privilege and power had now become symbols of downfall. As night fell, Darius sat alone in his hotel room, gazing at the city lights. He thought of the vow he made at his father's grave at 16. One day, I will make the world see the true worth of a person, not the color of their skin. Now that vow had come true, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed. He lifted his cup of tea and smiled. Tomorrow, the skies would be blue again, and justice would always fly first class. 1 year later, the morning sky was crystal clear. Sunlight glinted off the polished metal of an Aurelia Airlines jet, newly painted with a logo of open wings and a new slogan: "Every passenger is a guest of honor." Inside the first-class cabin, seat 2A had been carefully prepared. Fresh leather cushions gave off a new scent. A crystal glass rested on the side table, and a card lay neatly placed with handwritten words: "Welcome back." Darius Coleman entered the cabin. He wore a simple navy suit, no entourage, no staged reception. Just a quiet smile as he placed his bag in the overhead bin and sat down into seat 2A, the very seat once taken from him, but also the place where he had sparked a reform unlike anything the industry had ever seen. A young flight attendant approached, her face bright, her eyes warm. "Mr. Coleman, it is an honor to serve you today. If you need anything at all, please let me know." There were no suspicious glances, no condescending tones, only genuine respect. Since the day Aurelia signed the Pledge of Reform, the airline had transformed completely. Employees completed anti-bias training, learning to recognize and eliminate hidden prejudices. Dispute resolution became transparent, with every passenger having the right to file complaints without fear of retaliation. Voices that had once been silenced were now encouraged to speak. Customers noticed. Reviews flooded social media. For the first time, I felt treated like a human being, not just a ticket. Aurelia is different now. They listen, they respect, they truly change. Customer satisfaction reached record highs. Bookings surged back. From the edge of collapse, Aurelia had become an industry role model. Melissa, Ethan, Reeves, and Victoria, the names once buried in scandal, each found a new path. Melissa worked as a ground staff member in a second chance program funded by Darius himself, learning to serve with care instead of fear. Ethan trained new service workers, telling his story as a lesson in power and arrogance. Reeves became an instructor for young pilots, repeating the words, "Never stay silent in the face of injustice, because silence is also a crime." Victoria joined charitable work, using what remained of her wealth to fund scholarships for students in service industries. They could never erase their mistakes, but at least they had begun to rise from the ashes. On that flight, as the plane slowly ascended, Darius gazed out the window. White clouds drifted by. The vast sky stretched open. He closed his eyes, listening to the hum of the engines like the heartbeat of a new future. Beside him, the passenger in seat 2B turned with a smile. "Mr. Coleman, thank you. Because of you, we fly in a fairer world." Darius returned the look with gentle eyes. He said little, because he knew true change did not need grand speeches. It lived in this very moment. When a black man sat in first class, not because of power, not because of shares, but simply because he was a passenger and was respected like anyone else. The sun cast golden light across the wings. At thousands of feet in the air, Darius lifted his glass of water and whispered to himself, "Justice is not a privilege. It is a basic right of every human being." The flight continued, the deep blue sky opening wide, and the story of Seat 2A became a legacy, a reminder that sometimes it takes just one person standing up for an entire system to bow down and change. In a world where injustice can happen anywhere, the story of Darius Coleman reminds us that justice does not come from silence, but from the courage to stand up. Seat 2A was not just a place to sit. It became a symbol of change. If you believe that respect and fairness must always be protected, hit like to spread this message, subscribe so you never miss more inspiring stories, and leave a comment with just 2 words, justice, to affirm that you too stand on the side of what is right.